Hello everyone. Great to see so many of you joining us today for the second webinar of our series, the Modern Endpoint Management series. My name is Florian Salzmann and I'm your host today. Before we start, we have a video for you about our upcoming in-person summit in Paris, so please enjoy. So we're really thrilled about this in-person summit, which is coming up in September. As you saw, call for paper is already open if you're interested, and more information about tickets and everything will come up soon. So stay tuned in our group for that. And today joining me is Niklas. Hi, Niklas. Who will take over the next 30 minutes and dive in today's topic, which is one of the hot topic of the last few weeks. It's Windows Labs, the local administrator password solution, which is compatible with Azure AD. So that's awesome to finally have that and to see some things about that. Labs took over our group by storm. I'm sure you're already read a few blogs, and hopefully we can provide you today with some more information about the design, implementation, possible migration scenarios from a traditional on-premise solution, and other informations. So with further ado, let's get started. First, I will hand over to you, Niklas. Please introduce yourself. I'm sure some of us already saw your great posts. You were already ranked in the top 10 several times. So yeah, you in your own words.
Thank you very much, Florian. Hello, everyone. Nice to be in this session. First of all, I would like to thank you, Florian and Ankel, and all the official contributors. This LinkedIn group is really a great platform to provide such a deep technical community. It's great to be in here and to share some knowledge with the community, to have this exchange. All right, so actually this is my very first live session, so feedback is really appreciated at this time. Feel free to send us anything if you have feedback. All right, just to set the expectations a little bit, this will be around a level 300 session. We will go into some technical details, also with some demo slides. At the end, we will have a short Q&A session, so if there's anything open, please just wait till the end, and then we can discuss on these topics. You can write commentaries down there, but we will go into that. All right, Windows Labs will be today's topic. Let's get started. So my name is Niklas Tinner. I'm from Switzerland, such as Florian is. I run the blog oceanleaf.ch around enterprise mobility and security topics, so mainly focused on Intune and everything around the topics of modern endpoint management. So perfect for this platform. I'm an endpoint engineer working at BaseVision, also located in Switzerland, and there I also accompany several customers to their way to the modern endpoint management and the Microsoft Cloud. Great. So about the agenda, what's up for today? First, I want to have a little introduction about the local administrator password solution. What is it even about? What are our aims? What are our targets? Why are we doing this? Then also, what is Windows Labs? Because I'm sure most of us will still or does already know Labs. Now we'll have a look at the new Windows Labs. Next up, we will have some design topics. For sure, for the Azure AD scenario, it's pretty simple. You enable the tenant, set some configs, but behind the scenes, there's maybe a little bit more to talk about, especially the password retrieval and the administrator account, where I want to highlight some information about that. Then about the implementation or migration scenario. So for example, if you didn't have Labs in use yet, then you will start with an implementation, but maybe you will also have a migration scenario coming from legacy Labs to new Windows Labs. So we'll show you how to get started or how to transition. And last but not least, we will have some demo slides on the Azure AD scenario, quickly walk you through how to enable Windows Labs for the Azure AD scenario together with Intune, so the full modern way. All right, really excited. So let's get started with the introduction. First, as a disclaimer, Microsoft Labs, which was known until yet, is now renamed to Legacy Labs. So everywhere where you can find the ADMW or PWD setup of Microsoft Labs, this is now Legacy Labs. And Microsoft also officially recommends to migrate your Legacy Labs environment to Windows Labs. Labs, of course, the local administrator password solution, is here to manage, backup, rotate, and your local administrator password of your Windows devices. So why Labs? What is Labs? We want to control our local admin rights. On most operating systems, especially here now on Windows, we have a standard user accounts and privileged user accounts known as administrators. If we want to do manipulations to the system, so for example, if we want to install applications or install drivers or do anything more that maybe also be harmful to the system, we need administrative rights. With Labs, we can control them. We want protection against the pass-to-hash and lateral traversal attacks. This means that if you have a local administrator on your PC, and if this account is shared upon multiple devices and backed by the same credentials, once one of your systems get breached and these credentials get known or disclosed, all your system will get disclosed and maybe also are impacted by an adversary through an attack. And also for the improved help desk or remote support scenarios, so any staff that needs to support an end user with privileged rights to install something, here Labs is the perfect solution to get this work. As a general target, we want to eliminate shared or general local administrators on multiple devices. So I've listed some things which we maybe don't want to see as of now. One of them is clearly that the Azure AD roles of the joint local admin and global admins, that these are not assigned users, because these two roles are marked or are implemented as local admins on all of your devices which are joined to your tenant. So with Labs, there's no need for that, because this would be right. If an account with the local admin, with the joint local admin gets breached, all of your systems will be affected. Then we could also make modifications to the local user group membership. This is known also as account protection from Intune. There's a special policy type where we could add certain users to our local groups, also for the local administrator, assign it to a user or device group. And that's also something which we don't want to see, because also then the user account is then shared. Also, for the AD scenario, we have the domain admins used for any admin use on clients. This is definitely not the case. If you implement Labs the right way, you will not have the domain admins or any enterprise privileged administrators with a low tier executing admin code or programs on your end devices. Great. So about the new features, now we're talking Windows Labs. We have it now natively integrated into Windows. With which OS, which updates, what are the prerequisites, this is still coming, but you can remember the new Windows Labs is integrated in Windows natively, means no agent, no client-side extension is needed anymore like we had before. We can now also store passwords in Azure AD, so the cloud scenario, and of course Active Directory is generally already known from the Legacy Labs, but the Azure AD was really the highly anticipated feature we were looking for, that we can now back up our credentials to Azure AD only, for instance, if a device is not joined to local AD. We also have a password history feature now, which was also highly demanded, and post-authentication actions on or after the Labs usage. So this means if we have a successful authentication with the account who was managed by Labs, there's a post-authentication accomplished. So for example, reset the password of that account, log him off if it's an interactive session, or even reboot the PC. Then we also have a new PowerShell module, some new CMDlets, some new features, all very good described on the official docs of Microsoft. About Azure AD, what's new here? We have also native integration into Intune. This means we have as remote actions available on the device object. We can retrieve us the password, so the password in clear text or metadata information, or rotate the password of the labs admin. We can do the configuration through settings catalog. Also here in account protection policy, I will show that later. For AD, we have new schema attributes. That's just previously known here again as the ADM PWD schema attributes. These are now obsolete with the new Windows Labs. There we have MS Labs attributes where the new credentials are stored in. Also, this requires you to perform a schema update. Then we have a DSRM password support. This is the domain services restore mode. I hope everyone is familiar with that, because when you install a new instance of a domain controller, you need to specify that password. And you can also back that now up with Labs. But this password is generally only used in a disaster recovery scenario, so not typical something you want to have every day or something. We'll do the configuration with new GPO files, so new ADMX, ADML files, which are also integrated into Windows natively. And we have a support for encryption on the AD level. Now, talking about the architecture, I will show that at the Azure AD scenario, because this is a little bit more simple to show. First of all, we have an IT administrator who configures the client settings. For example, Intune could also be GPO. And here we would set the backup directory to Azure AD. The device retrieves that policy, processes it, and then it will back up the device local credentials to the corresponding Azure AD device object. There, the metadata information is stored, such as when the password will expire, is there even a Labs password set, and some more information, but not the password in clear text. But also additionally, if you have the right permissions, you can retrieve the password in clear text. Then we as an IT administrator can retrieve the device local credentials, so metadata and clear text password through either graph, so through Graph Connect and the Graph CMTLets, but also through the UI in Azure AD and Intune. Pretty simple. Okay, now to the design topics. First of all, I would like to talk about password retrieval, because there's some specialities, or maybe also differentiate between the scenario you're going. So if you're in the cloud, if you're with Azure, we have some built-in roles in Azure, such as the Intune admin, cloud device admin, or global admin, who can natively retrieve the password in clear text. There are more roles, you can find them on my blog post or on the official docs, who have only access to the metadata information. This would be someone like the help desk administrator or the lower privileged roles. If you now want to limit access for admins to a set of devices, so to retrieve, for example, that the USA admin only can retrieve the password for US devices, and you can do so with administrative units. For AD, we typically configure an AD group, and here we have mainly two things that need to be done. On the one hand, we have the GPO setting, which is named the AD password encryption principle, which essentially means that there's an SID or a group or some identity that can decrypt the encrypted password of the Labs credentials. But attention, this is only applicable if you enable password encryption as feature in the new Windows Labs. Then we can set the extended rights, or we also need to set the extended rights. This was also known from the legacy labs on the organizational unit level, and with that CMTLet you can see there to reach us the password. Now, if you have a password encryption enabled, you need to do both of them. This also leads to the fact that if you have multiple O structures and different password decryptors, you need several GPOs, because the SID or the identity is always or is not always the same one. So this leads to the fact that you need multiple GPOs just to configure different principles for different O's to decrypt the password. Then we have the administrative or the admin account. In Windows, we have a natively built-in Windows account. This one, attention, has some specialities because it is disabled by default. That's just a general security mechanism, disabled by default. Yeah, just to know. It also has no lockout threshold. That means you can unlimitedly try a password to access that account. But here, an important note, if you apply the security baselines of the Microsoft Security Configuration Framework, this does actually modifications to the local security policy, which then enables a lockout threshold for that built-in account. Another relevant note here is that if you installed your Windows system with 22H2, your devices will automatically have that lockout enabled, but this is not applicable for devices that run just 22H2, but instead they need to be set up with that version. This correlates with the same instantiation of your device, which only happens once at the setup. So with all the facts known, attackers could theoretically brute force this account. Well, sorry, I missed one. And this is the well-known SID. That means that the first and the last parts of the security identifier of the built-in administrative accounts is always the same. So attackers just know which account they might need to target. This all leads to the fact that attackers may brute force this account because it's known and they have no lockup threshold. Yeah, and of course, you need to enable the accounts once you implement Windows Labs. But in my opinion, it's the better way. My recommendation is here to set countermeasures and address these vulnerabilities by creating a dedicated local administrator account, which is then managed by Labs. You can do so through GPO, through a PowerShell script, also through config manager, configuration items. That's really up to you. Important is just you need to specify that the local admin account, so what is the name of it, so that Labs knows which account it needs to manage its credentials. Okay, so for the implementation or migration, first I want to talk about the prerequisites. From the operating system, we need a Windows 10 and 11 with the April 2023 update installed. That's really important. If you want to check if your device is applicable for Windows Labs, you can go to see policy definitions, Windows policy definitions, and there you should see a Labs ADMX file. If that is existing, yeah, you know Labs is theoretically applicable on your system. For servers, there's only a support guaranteed, or there's only working functionality for Windows Labs if your server has the version 2019 and above. Also here requiring the April 2023 update installed. There's no down-level support. Microsoft clearly states that, so only these systems are applicable for Windows Labs. Also, if you want to use really all features, namely here the encryption feature for the AD scenario, you need a domain functional level 2016 or sometimes above. This is relevant to have the password encryption feature enabled and some other features. For licensing and costs, you have nothing because it's integrated in the operating system, or also for every Azure subscription, or how should I say, in every Azure tenant where you have an Azure AD free license. For the roles to configure Windows Labs, in the AD scenario, you need a schema admin just to perform the schema update. It's a simple thing, not really doing much. It's just adding some new schema attributes, but I've done this several times without issues. So from my experience, this is just a small part. And then you also need a domain admin, of course, to configure the GPO, the client settings for Windows Labs. For Azure AD, you need a cloud device admin at least, and an Intune administrator. Cloud device admin is just to enable Windows Labs in your tenant, and the Intune admin to configure the account protection policies or proactive remediation. So talking about the scenarios here, I want to differentiate also here from the Active Directory and Azure Active Directory scenario. Starting with the Active Directory scenario, we have obviously our backup directory only in AD. It's also an important note that your Labs credentials can't be backed at 2 directories at a time, so you need to specify for one device at a time, is it AD or is it Azure AD? But here in the AD scenario, it's clearly AD. And also what I would recommend, I would only recommend that if you want to back up the Labs credentials for an AD joint device, that should only be for the joint state of AD joint. Not hybrid joint, that would be theoretically possible, but I would say if your devices are already hybrid joint, you can directly go for the backup in Azure AD. Policy deployment is cleared through GPO, and maybe if you want to create an additional admin, you may also use PowerShell or configuration items from Config Manager. So the implementation steps, I will just go theoretically through it. If you need more information, consider to read my blog post or the official docs. But what you need essentially to do in the AD scenario to set Windows Labs up is to perform the schema update. So it's essentially just an update minus Labs AD schema. Then you're ready to go. Set the extended rights also with PowerShell on the organizational unit level. Configure the GPO settings. Of course, here copy the ADMX file to the central store, and also here GPO or any other mechanism method to create that additional local administrator. From my perspective, I would go for this scenario for Windows servers and any other device which is on-premise only or not even hybrid joined. For Azure AD, the backup directory, yeah, obviously Azure AD. And here I would do that if my client is Azure AD joined or hybrid joined, because then you can go vice versa. You can configure the GPO to back up the credentials to Azure AD, even though the client is only hybrid joined and not fully Azure AD joined. Policy deployment is accomplished through Intune Settings Catalog or GPO as mentioned. And for the implementation, I have some demo slides incoming for that. But in the essence, it's first of all to enable your tenant. So there's a tenant setting, you need to enable that. Then Windows Labs is enabled for your instance. You can furthermore need to do the Intune Settings Catalog, the account protection. Also, I have some images from that coming. And my favorite method is a proactive remediation, or now it was renamed to just remediation, to create the additional local admin. I would go for this scenario for any Windows default client, any Office client, anything else, just for the default device which is found and either hybrid or fully Azure AD joined. So the setup scenario in Azure AD, these are the steps required to enable Labs. Pretty simple. First of all, you need to do the tenant enablement. For this one, to get it done, you need to go to Azure AD or the Entra Admin Center, go to your device settings, and there's this highlighted setting, enable Azure AD local administrator password solution. You need to switch that to on, and then you're ready to go. Important to note, as of now, or the last statement we have is from April 21st, is that Windows Labs is still in public preview for the Entra and Azure AD as well as Intune scenario. To perform this step, you need either a cloud device admin or global admin, and it must only be done once. All right. Then the settings catalog. For this, you switch to the Intune portal, go to the endpoint security blade, and here account protection. There you can find a new template version for Windows Labs. You can just create a profile and here specify all the settings. Most of them are also known from the legacy Labs. Here important to mention is for example, that if you want a separate administrator account, you need that to specify here. Important, this will not create or enable your account, but instead only tell Labs which account is then used for that functionality. So really important to know, if you want a separate admin, you need to create that externally. Then password age days, complexity, we already know that. So how long is my Labs password valid? What is the complexity of it? I will always go with the highest security standard here. Password length by default 14 jars. Then the new setting here is the post-authentication actions and reset delay. My recommendation here is to reset the password after the use and also log off the account, but this is only working if it was an interactive session. Then the post-authentication reset delay specifies in which time span that action happens. So after authenticating successfully, this can range from anywhere from 0 to 24 hours. To create this policy, you need an Intune administrator. Now, the last step would be, optionally but recommended, is to create the proactive remediation script. to create that additional local admin. So pretty simple script. You just go or are already in the Intune portal, create a remediation script package, and you can grab the reference files from my blog. These were initially created by my colleague Nicola Suter, so kudos to him. And this will only detect if there's your local administrator account. Is it even here, and is it enabled? And if that's not the case, the remediation will be triggered and create that account, add it to the local administrator group. That's essentially it. You need to specify that the script runs in a 46-bit PowerShell session, and that's it. For this as a requirement, you need the Intune administrator account again, and the script files, like I said, found on my blog or also by Nicola Suter if you Google him. So the migration scenario, Microsoft clearly states that it's possible to run legacy labs and Windows labs side by side. That's an interesting thing, but only if you target distinct accounts. So you would need to have the admin A, for example, targeted by Windows labs, which is the new labs here with all the features we've seen right now, and another admin B local account, which is managed by legacy labs. Then a side-by-side scenario is officially supported. And you can find that statement in the FAQ section of Microsoft Learn for the Windows labs. So that would be one migration scenario, but you could theoretically also go through a switchover. So for example, if you say, hey, from now on, we're going to use Windows labs, you can target the same account. You might have some delay from switching from legacy labs to Windows labs until a GPO applies and the client recognizes, hey, it's now Windows labs, but this is also a valid migration path. It's generally always recommended to do a small proof of concept here to have some testing time, see what's really the impact, because it can also differentiate from your environment. For example, if you have multiple domain controllers with synchronization enabled or application enabled, this can vary from the environment setup. Please don't forget about the cleanup actions. So once the migration is complete, you say you're not using legacy labs anymore and have Windows labs fully implemented, you can theoretically unlink and delete the old GPOs because these are not needed anymore for legacy labs. And also the old client component, client-side extension, the Windows Labs agent, which was installed before, you can set that to uninstall. Because once the new Windows Labs is implemented, there's no component needed, it's all built into Windows. Then if you had another distinct account which was only managed by legacy labs, you can of course disable and delete them. And last but not least, you can also do that as an integrity action to remove the extended rights. But here to say, it's not that, I would say, the extended rights, if Windows Labs is active and Legacy Labs doesn't even work because the client-side extension and all the GPOs aren't here, the extended rights are just a dead body in here and not really an impact. I've already done several migrations and implementations, especially for the cloud scenario. From what I've seen now, it works pretty good and it's pretty reliable. There's some minor bugs in the product. If you want to know more, consider to read Rudy Ohm's blog. Some interesting details. But for the core functionality, I would say everything works. I've made some good experiences with it, and it was a highly anticipated feature. So it's great to see it now here. All right, so that was a brief introduction into Windows Labs and everything what's important from the technical side. We're just going to start a Q&A session to make this a little bit more interactive. But I would really like to thank you for your attention here. I hope you could learn something. And Windows Labs is definitely something for every environment, something very important. And then I would say, let's get us Florian back and start for the Q&A session. So I can already see some questions. Okay. So my understanding, Jakub Voda asked, my understanding is in the built-in local admin account is renamed and disabled as the SID is known. Therefore, labs, it is recommended to create a new local admin account and use that instead. Yes, that's totally right, because the built-in admin, as said, is well known, and you can rename that, of course, but the SID stays the same. So a little bit on the security side there. Okay.
Thank you, Nicholas, for that awesome presentation. We also got a question from a user which had problems creating the new local admin. But I guess it's him who already wrote that probably the proactive remediation will solve his problem, because he had problems with the reporting, I guess, with the OMA URI. So I saw that as well for several times. So big thanks for the script to you, Niklas. That looks very good and promising.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great solution to do it with proactive or just remediations now to solve this issue.
Yeah, exactly. So I also walked through the Yoma URI setup, but I mean, it works, but it doesn't work all the time. Yoma URI is something like I would call a little bit legacy. The proactive remediation is definitely better here. And this was also for the reporting scenarios. I mean, you have a detection and a remediation script. You have perfect reporting on that. So great experiences done with that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and we also got a question or a statement that with the CSP policy, you need to define a password. I think that's correct. And yeah, with that, you have a small time where the password on every end client is the same. So definitely the best way is with the PR. And if I stood it right, in your PR, you don't send any password. You just say create the account and enable it.
Yes, exactly. So the password is really needed for account creation, but it's generated as secure string via PowerShell. So random password, we don't know it. The attacker doesn't know it. It's not always the same. So I think that's the best way we can perform that. So again, kudos to Niklas Sutter. Cool script here.
Yeah, definitely. And we also got some users who asked about the slides and the link to the URL. I'm sure Niklas will share it afterwards in the LinkedIn event, so you can download the slides there. And you will also, I think you put in your URL to the blog. And now here, perfect. So you will find everything there. And then we got a question from David. What is better to use the account protection settings, aka the settings catalog, or custom OMA URIs? So I would definitely say go with the settings catalog. It's much more convenient, and you have a better understanding what is doing which setting.
Yes, exactly. Also, I think the mindset really is for Microsoft that everything kind of moves in that settings catalog. And of course, we have configuration policies, which are settings catalog, but essentially the endpoint security settings are also some kind of settings catalog. And if Microsoft already gives us there a great template with all settings needed for labs, that's something great I would directly use. And that's definitely also the way Microsoft thinks of it. Important to notice, maybe sometime in the future, if we see new features for labs implemented, you maybe need to update the account protection policy, because these are always a template ID and a settings catalog is always up to date, but this is not the case for endpoint security. But as of now, I think we're perfectly fine going for the account protection policy.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say we take one last question, which came in. If it's if end users need admin access, what's the plan there? Do you want to answer that, Niklas, or should I?
You can go for it if you want.
Okay. Yeah, labs for that wouldn't be the perfect case, but you have endpoint privilege management, which is part of the new Intune suite, where you can solve problems like that. So you can say a user can have partial admin access for a specific application or for a specific period of time. There you would have the end user perspective. Otherwise, like the quick and dirty way would be to provide the user with the labs password so he can use it once, but I wouldn't recommend that, because don't believe the users when they say they only install one application. They will do whatever they can do in those 24 hours.
Yeah, agree on that. Exactly. So maybe one more question here. Ramesh had a question regarding the cleanup. If the legacy labs and Windows labs use the same account, well, of course, you then can't just disable or delete that account. But here, what you definitely can do is uninstall the client-side extension and also the old GPOs which are obsolete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So with that, on behalf of the whole group, I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today, and especially to you, Niklas, for providing us with this great presentation, and especially the proactive remediation part, I think, will help a lot of us, and we can learn something from that. If any of you is interested in like a level 1000 deep dive, Rudy published one blog post yesterday, which you will find on our group as well. So that's really detailed. What happens if you do a rotation? What happens after you used everything? So that's really great. And if you have any further questions, you can contact us via the socials, which are linked on this page. I think at the moment you don't see it perfectly, but you will see it afterwards again. And yeah, once again, thanks you. And I'm looking forward to all the future events which we will hold in this Modern Endpoint Management series. I wish you all a great day, and goodbye.
Thank you. All the best.